Well, ladies and gentlemen, now let's begin with our panel discussion that's on navigating crisis communications in the digital age. We have our panelists who will be joining us shortly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, once again, we'd like to thank our marketing professionals who've been with us, given us their valuable insights, and made this event very engaging and valuable for each one of us. We'd like to thank them. And now let's begin with this last panel discussion of this evening. I would like to invite on stage our session chair, Nandini Chatterjee, former Chief Marketing and Communications Officer, PwC. Hello, ma'am. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. We request you to please join us. We have amongst us Akriti Thakur, AVP Brand and Marketing, Healthians. Hi, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us. Please put your hands together for Jasrita Dheer, Director, Marketing and Communications, Karkinos Healthcare. Hi, ma'am. We have amongst us Juhi Gorwara, Director, Brand Communication, Digital Philips, Indian Subcontinent. Manu Kumar, Head Marketing and Corporate Communications, Hero Electric Vehicles. Hi, sir. Nishita Sharma, Lead Communications, Marketing and Advocacy, UNICEF. Hello, ma'am. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. We have amongst us Shagun Sharma, Branding and Communication, Head Teamology. All right, ladies and gentlemen, can we give our panelists a big round of applause, please? Thank you so much. Over to you.
Okay, thanks a lot for introducing all of us. I think crisis or sensitive situations, as we call them, is something a lot of us in the PR and comms fraternity have been handling it. Pretty much experienced. I can't say whether we are adept or not, because I think there are a lot of variables that are normally there to see whether we handle well or not. I mean, look at what's happening in the aviation industry. Fog. I mean, who can control fog? And then you've heard of anybody who had a mobile and is a journalist. If you look at past, what were we doing? We would go to agencies, like Ashwini would be helping us, and we would say that, okay, this is a relationship over here, they are doing a story, and can we get our perspective over there, and hopefully it would be balanced. Usually that was the case, but now anybody with a mobile is technically, if you can call them a journalist, and they just go and write what they want to write. There is no mediation at all, and you're left grappling with it. So at a click, things are moving. I think in that day and age that now we are in, how do we handle it? I think things have become so much more complex. So all of us here are handling, but today let's hear from them. How are we handling this new space and getting around it? How do we manage to still, or do we manage to still control the narrative, which is something that all of us want to do? How do we engage with the people over there whom we don't even really know? I mean, in the case of journalists, still we know them and we are able to get our point across. How do we handle the kind of emotions that are running very high? I mean, you imagine somebody who's locked up in the flight for 10 hours, and you saw what happened. You saw the person who went. You saw the pilot just coming and doing his bit to say what he had to say. And you saw the kind of reaction. So how do you handle something like that? And we had people sitting on the tarmac and having food. But then the kind of repercussions, I mean, anybody can just go and do what they had to do. So, Manu, let's start with you. In this changing, evolving scenario of the digital age, set the context. What are you seeing changing, and how are you gearing up for it?
Thank you. What's happening is that a comms professional or a company which is, putting out, their viewpoint or has completely changed. So earlier we were probably dealing with, people who are writing about us in the print, etc. But now what is happening is that we are not only engaging with that person, but also with the general audience, or my consumer, for example, in our case, So if there is a report which goes out, it's not only, your viewpoint which you've already given to a journalist probably, but there are questions which are coming out from the, general consumer. And it's a free for all kind of a thing. They can write anything, and there are so many platforms, so you have Instagram, you have a LinkedIn, and you have various other, social channels, etc. So one of the things which have become is that, the comms professional inside the organizations have to be very agile. Apart from, if you have an external agency which is handling your, communications. And it's also, because in a lot more cases, the social media is being handled by someone else, or, a different team within the organization than the comms professional. So the, linkages between the teams have to be much more stronger. What you want to put out has to be the right thing. It has to be more, you have to be more transparent. But apart from everything else, you have to be very agile. Because, the journalists used to give you some time.
Yeah.
Especially earlier, especially when
and
you
even that used to be less.
Yes.
Many a times used to be grappling to the evening to get a message out.
But now, you don't have that liberty of having that kind of, time at your hand. You have to probably immediately respond on social media immediately. And because if you don't, then overnight it could, a small thing could become a, very, very big issue. And it can go viral, people share, reshare, there are images, people start talking about it. So you can't wait for the next morning on saying that, we'll respond tomorrow and you can do the story probably next evening. Even, if you look at mainline dailies, etc., they have that challenge of putting out the news on their website immediately, The print probably comes out next day morning, but, everybody has their website. So they will say that, please respond by 4 p.m. Otherwise, we'll say we sent a mail and there was no response kind of a thing. But that story has already come, and that story has more repercussions because it's already there on the social media, So by the time you decide to respond or what you want to respond, so yeah, the challenges are manifold now. So probably, have to be more agile. You need to understand that you are talking to a very large audience now. Earlier, probably you reply to the journal and the story came out and there was a limited set of people who were interested to look if it was a corporate kind of a story. Now your consumers are actually looking at it very closely. So the repercussions are many, many fold. And ultimately you are there in the business of selling the product. You are just not putting your viewpoint. You're putting your viewpoint about your product or your brand or any issue which is there. And your consumer is looking at it. Your other stakeholders, which could be your shareholders, it could be the government, etc., everyone's there. And so the repercussions are much larger. So you need to be quicker. The teams have to be aligned, both external as well as internal teams. And so yes, the role of a comms professional has changed many, many folds. And I think as newer technologies keep coming in, then there is, how do you handle it? There are, that discussion will happen in this panel. But I think, so yeah, the role has,
it's become even more complex than what it was. But Jui, coming to you, I mean, I understand agility. Agility was always the ask even earlier. But then agility on one side, getting facts right, and leading to more complications. What are your comments on that?
Absolutely. So while I agree with everything that Manu said, but I'm not very sure we should reply immediately. In fact, we don't usually do that in the consumer business because you've got to check your facts before responding. Because otherwise, something which now people reading might take as just a social media outburst could snowball into a crisis. So the best would be to have your crisis team in place to suggest what you should do in the long term. Take legal advice. Reach out to your customer service if somebody's complaining about a product not working or someone's, in case of the airline, right? It's very important to figure out what were the reasons behind it before responding. Yeah. And then reply keeping in mind the various scenarios that you've pre-planned in your head, right? What could happen? At least the 3 responses you're likely to get, prepare accordingly, and tell your marketing teams as well that while you make brand posts, there could be a linkage to the crisis that we just averted, so that they're prepared as well.
Yeah. Jasita, you want to add to the preparation part? What are you doing? Because agility, we understand the need to make sure that your crisis doesn't snowball into a bigger crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like we talk a lot about machine learning, humans also learn over a period of time. So as businesses, we go about transacting our business. Over a period of time, the marketing teams, the comms team, the operations team, they know what are the 80% of the issues with which there is a problem. They spoke about a consumer business. I'll talk about a healthcare business. So if a doctor is late to an OPD, it's going to fall. It's not an unheard of, sort of a scenario or an unthinkable scenario. So 80% of the scenarios where there could be an irate customer, there could be a grievance, have templated, pre-approved responses ready to deploy. For those 20% of the situations which have come up, which is that's really hit you like a crisis that you didn't see coming from a mile, is where I'll defer to what Juhi said, that at that time, get your facts right, just acknowledge. But I think the thing is that you have to acknowledge and you have to validate what people are feeling. As crisis comms people, and especially legal, there is always this thing about, zero silence, maintain, do not talk, do not say anything. My thing is, part of preparedness is also to say you're listening, and you're acknowledging, and you're only validating what the person is feeling. Say, I'm sorry you're upset. I'll come back to you once I get my, facts.
Empathize.
Empathize with them, because there is something disarming about telling someone, I hear you, I'm there to listen to you, but let me fact find and I'll come back to you in 24 hours or 48 hours. So I would say this Pareto's principle applies very nicely for this 80-20. And also, I think having your crisis communicators being part of the consumer redressal groups, listening into your ORM, your command center, FAQs that are coming in, gives you a nice flavor of what are the chronic issues which are simmering, so could snowball into a controversy, and what is an acute issue which is kind of spiking, and therefore preempt it. So I think these are 2 or 3 things.
So I guess for any crisis situation, the first leg always is preparing. So if we just dwell on that, and maybe if you want to pick that up, Nishita, yours is a social advocacy space. How are you preparing, and what kind of crisis do you actually see?
So one thing is to always remember who's at the receiving end of your communication. It is a person who's consuming your brand, and something that about your brand is impacting her life, her decisions, or the quality of things that she's doing in her life. So coming back from there can be irate customers. Even in humanitarian situations, if we look at people who are going through a certain crisis, it's very important in the preparation stage to isolate these instances. We may have 11,000 brand mentions on a particular day and just one negative comment, and that person who's put out that comment may have very less number of followers online. But it's very important to look at these kind of comments and see, okay, this seems to be a concern with one person, but it could snowball into something bigger tomorrow. It's very important to have these social listening measures like Jasrita mentioned. ORM is very critical to look at what the industry is talking about, what is it that your consumers are talking about, and with these isolated examples together, how are these insights informing your social media content, for example? Is that an awareness issue? One of the brands that I worked with in the past, GoDaddy, there was a person who would come back to our posts over and over and say that my website is not working. But this person hadn't renewed the domain, right? It's a yearly thing. So when we looked at just this one comment, we were able to inform our social media content strategy with it. We ran an entire campaign on just consumer awareness. These are very small things that we would think are understood as a brand, but for a consumer, these small things could become really big. So from the preparation perspective, how are you listening to people? How is that informing your content strategy? And therefore, also, whether it's the customer care who's able to deal with these scenarios or your business teams, if there are issues that they have not identified earlier or some unintended repercussions of your brand, they might be able to provide for a solution beforehand. So being over-prepared is always better than to look back at a crisis and say, we could have done these 10 things, faster.
Have any of you also gone through a situation like this, where you put out a very innocuous post, and then you find that somebody, because of some past whatever, has taken the post off on a tangent. Have you gone through something like that?
Sure. With Philips, because we've got the healthcare business and then the consumer business, the kind of responses we get are extremely different. So on the same post, let's say we talk a little bit about a brand message or a LinkedIn post from our CEO. There could be a response where one person, irrespective of what we're saying, will just say that my lights are not working and I tried reaching out to your customer care, no one's responding, what do I do? So a response to something that simple would be sharing the customer care number or going back and checking with them if they really put out a complaint. But on the other hand, if somebody on the same post would say something about a cath lab which has an issue with a hospital where they didn't hear back from us, or an equipment not working, or somebody from the government, then looking at the gravity of the situation, you have to deep dive. You might have to get in touch with the person, ask them what the issue is, and actually solve it. Put out a response so you build credibility with the others, and they understand that in case I cannot get in touch with customer care, the brand is listening to me through whatever source I choose.
How often do you go offline to handle and then request the person to take off the post? Is that something you do?
Yeah. So, may I take that, or you wanted to go? Yeah. I think the basic principles of trying to sort out an issue remain the same from an offline or an online space. The basic principles don't change. So when there is a feud between, let's say, two parties, you always try and sort it out either face-to-face, in a safe space, in a neutral space, or if you need with a mediator. So the same principles apply. Now, if somebody is ranting online again and again, just because he hasn't renewed the domain or something like that, which we also face a lot in hospitals, you try and deflect it to an offline space. You should tell them, DM us your details, sir, and our patient welfare officer or whoever it is would get in touch with you, right? Now, there are only two scenarios emerging from it. Either the person plays ball, gets to a space, and you're able to sort it out amicably. Great. It's a wonderful world to live in. The other scenario is the person goes on ranting because they want their 4 minutes of fame, right? Do not give them those 4 minutes of fame. So the more that they try to keep ranting online, the more you say that we are available, we've sent you the details, talk to us so that we can sort it out. To the whole World Wide Web, you don't have to let them take a go what has to be between two parties. To them, all you have to say, like she mentioned, is that we are a responsive brand. We are listening, we are responding, and we are very available and accessible to sort it out, right? So deflecting it offline is actually the strategy that we deploy.
Akriti, coming.
If I can just add to that, what could also happen is the person does not want to talk to you in person, or they do not want any DMs. They want to put their issues in public for a different reason. They want to increase their follower base or become a superstar somewhere else. So therefore, if you do your background checks before responding, or in a lot of cases not respond at all, just directly send a DM and say, share your details and we'll respond. If they do not respond to your DM and still keep cribbing, like the example that you shared, then you know it's not for the right reasons.
Have you ever taken recourse to deleting posts which were not okay? Not appropriate?
Yeah, I would take that up maybe.
Oh, okay.
So I think that's the worst way to go about it, deleting it. In fact, I agree to what Jasrita and Juhi just mentioned that, there are times when people would just do it to get would escalate something and just try to blow it out of proportion just to get their 2 minutes of fame. And it's always good to interact with them one-to-one, either just call them directly or try and approach them on DM, ask for their details, at least acknowledge the fact that you're listening as a brand. And do it one-on-one, maybe through a DM or something. Take the details, thoughtfully, just prepare a plan around it, build the communication and just put it across. Right, and what we've also done apart from as a brand, what we also did was to create a separate page for escalation handling. Because most of the times when somebody is searching for your brand online, these kind of escalations pop up in the search engines. But to have a separate page altogether that is only dedicated to escalations, and every time that a person would tag you on their main page, you reply back with that other alternate escalation space that you've. So it just helps you in the search engines as well. And coming back to the question that you asked, I don't think that that's a pretty good way because, I mean, if a customer who's really is organically coming in and is really irritated, naturally, I mean, as a brand, you're not taking responsibility and you're not owning up to something, then that just shows that, okay, there's something that as a brand you've not done right. And for a person who is just doing it because, it's a competitor post or being manipulated, he is going to do that over and over again.
Throw a little more light on how are you preparing
Sure.
for your area? What all do you do?
So there's definitely a crisis communication plan that is in place, and which is not a one-size-fit-all document, kind of document, but it's just a strategy, a plan like that just helps you, address the issue more effectively and more promptly, and it charts out the to-dos or what should be really done during a crisis management issue when there's one. Who will be the escalation metrics is something that it again charts out on the TAT, even defining some acknowledgement templates that are some ready to use templates that can be used. And apart from that, of course, promptly acknowledging the escalation is number two. I think that is really, really important, while it is also important to have a deeper study of what kind of escalation is that. And if you feel that that is not really coming your way, you can just refrain from putting out anything at all. Just don't be a part of the conversation at all. But I think acknowledgement really helps, because then as a brand, you're just putting up a communication that you are owning up to it.
So I'll come back to the agile bit and prompt response, like you said. And we said one challenge is the fact checking, making sure the legal piece is handled. Any other challenges you want to share with everybody over here? What are the challenges that you faced in real-time response?
So I think one of the things we also need to remember is that an organization.
So it just helps you in the search engines as well. And coming back to the question that you asked, I don't think that that's a pretty good way because, I mean, if a customer who's really is organically coming in and is really irritated, naturally, I mean, as a brand, you're not taking responsibility and you're not owning up to something, then that just shows that, okay, there's something that as a brand you've not done right. And for a person who is just doing it because, it's a competitor post or being manipulated, he is going to do that over and over again.
Throw a little more light on how are you preparing for your area? What all do you do?
So there's definitely a crisis communication plan that is in place, and which is not a one-size-fit-all document, kind of document, but it's just a strategy, a plan like that just helps you, address the issue more effectively and more promptly, and it charts out the to-dos or what should be really done during a crisis management issue when there's one. Who will be the escalation metrics is something that it again charts out on the TAT, even defining some acknowledgement templates that are some ready to use templates that can be used. And apart from that, of course, promptly acknowledging the escalation is number two. I think that is really, really important, while it is also important to have a deeper study of what kind of escalation is that. And if you feel that that is not really coming your way, you can just refrain from putting out anything at all. Just don't be a part of the conversation at all. But I think acknowledgement really helps, because then as a brand, you're just putting up a communication that you are owning up to it.
So I'll come back to the agile bit and prompt response, like you said. And we said one challenge is the fact checking, making sure the legal piece is handled. Any other challenges you want to share with everybody over here? What are the challenges that you faced in real-time response?
So I think one of the things we also need to remember is that an organization is made up of people. Our people are our biggest brand ambassadors, but they can also be the ones who could sometimes unknowingly add to a complication by sharing too much information. So while us communications people are used to training, media training our spokespeople, Now, what is even more important than media training spokespeople, because that's a bunch of people only, is to social media train all employees. I think that is something we should definitely do so they understand the nuances of real-time responses, disengaging where required, representing your brand in a public space. And if you want to put out a personal opinion, to have a disclaimer that this is your own opinion and not of the organization. So these kind of basic things, I think, need to be put in place when people join in. Also because the Gen Y and Gen Z have everything on their phones, right? They see the brand pop up or their role pop up or events pop up. They would want to share their opinion on every topic. So you have to educate them.
Yeah. Any challenge, any other challenge any of you want to share that you faced in real-time response?
So there are two examples that I would like to share. First is to add to the question that you were asking earlier about deleting somebody's comment. And I agree entirely with Akriti that, that's not the way to go about it. But we had one exceptional sort of a moment before, cannot disclose the brand, but it was a rice brand. And we were talking about festive season and dishes that you can prepare with long grain basmati rice. And then somebody thought we are another rice brand who has a certain brand ambassador who has made a certain comment in the context of that day and what was trending. And this person kept coming back to our social media channels and saying we should boycott this rice brand. And it was a clear case of mistaken identity because we were clearly not that brand. And it was a very perplexing situation for us that, should we let people discover it? Or should we act with urgency? So I think after responding to that person a couple of times, that was a scenario where we had to delete it. Another example is
just on that question, did you find that the likes or the reactions were increasing on that you felt the need to act?
Yeah, so people started coming and sort of echoing the sentiment.
Okay.
And it wasn't related to anything we had done. So in this case, luckily, we did not need a legal approval. We did not have to consult with the business heads or anybody else in the organization because we could clearly sort of understand where this was coming from. Right. But responding helped us garner some eyeballs through those comments, but we did not use that opportunity in any other direction. But yeah, that was an exceptional scenario where we had to resort to this way. Another example that I would like to add to what Juhi said, we've had instances where people put out fake identities of working with our organization and then come out with too much information or grievances. And that is a scenario which is very difficult to sort of deal with. And that is a challenge that even if you're flagging it to a platform such as LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, the resolution of that doesn't come in that quickly. You're not able to report the profile. It's not acted upon in real time. So these are some scenarios where we find it very difficult to control the crisis or control the narrative. It can also sort of lend itself to volunteers who work with us on the ground for certain event, or they have been a part of some event somewhere, but they would say that they are a part of our organization. Now, they are people we cannot really extend social media training to. We can do it with our employees, we can do it with our partners, but what do you do with people you do not have that direct connection with? So these two challenges are, things that we find it very difficult to deal with.
The reason why I asked you about did you see activity happening was, and I remember a case where there was a comment on Twitter by a politician talking about a project which our organization, he presumed we had done, and in the process of using that as a context, actually went on to lambast the government. Now, I remember I was under a lot of pressure by our leaders because they said this project is not being done by us. And so the natural, obvious thing is to go over there and say that, listen, sir, you got your facts wrong, and this is not a project being done by us. But I still remember pushing back and telling them, let's just wait and watch the conversation. And yes, every 10 minutes it was escalating. Again, the normal fright would be that, okay, it's escalating, react and clarify. But what we did was to hear the conversation and see what are they talking about. And we found, interestingly, that there wasn't even a single conversation on the company. While they had set the context, the entire conversation went off on politics and government and all. And we said, if we go and now put something from our side to clarify, and I'm saying there is no right or wrong answer to this, but had we gone and clarified, there was every possibility we would have pulled the conversation again back to us. So we just let it go. Now, here the thing was that can you manage to convince your internal leaders to just hold on, to stay calm, to stay cool till you listen and not get agitated, which in social media, the tendency of getting agitated is pretty high. But any other examples?
Yeah, so what I want to say is that over a period of time, what we also realize is that if you cannot beat them, join them. And this I mean about the younger. When we know that they have phones in their hands, while you establish a crisis control room and while you pretty much still establish a clear chain of command as to who would be there and not everyone on the shop floor can speak, you know that people are going to give their point of view, their personal independent point of view. If you cannot stop that from happening, what do? What we started doing a couple of times and to a good level of success is now send out a WhatsApp to the people saying, hey, this is what the organization's view is. Obviously, you're not going to give a full response, but a basic 3 or 4 line response. So if somebody reaches out to you in your network, this is what the organization's response is. To that, we've been able to control to a great extent, I won't say fully, that the narrative now that's going out is a calibrated narrative without people having their own go at it, right? And that helps in not just real-time response, but also real-time calibrating the response a little bit and not letting it go out of hand.
So 2 more perspectives I want to bring on. One, are you using influencers or advocates or third party to actually speak on your behalf? I mean, have you successfully, any of you have used them?
Yeah, so we work with influencers quite a lot, and there are different influencers for different brands within the larger piece.
And during crisis, you actually activate them?
During crisis as well, because when you're using an influencer to sell, they represent your brand in some way or form. The consumer feels, for example, Virat Kohli's beard, when people look at it, they somehow now in their mind feel, yes, it's a Philips trimmer.
Yeah.
Personally, irrespective of what he uses, that's the image that people get, right? So in terms of, let's say there was a crisis with that brand, we already have the credibility established with the person who's representing our brand, and we could leverage that. Yeah. But that's at a very large scale. But when we talk about influencers on a YouTube channel or on our own social media channels, right, these would be micro-influencers, sometimes influencers that are just showing how do you use a certain product, or the benefits of, for example, we also have a mother and child care brand called Avent. So with Avent, we work with a lot of mom bloggers, mom influencers who talk about the benefits of breastfeeding, for example, who would talk about their own motherhood journey. So they're not directly talking about our brand, but they're helping us with our category. They're helping us just tell new mothers what's good for them. And they are the ones who are, in a way, driving other young mothers to use products that will help them in their journey without talking about brands.
The second, yeah, sorry, go ahead,
I
Manu.
wanted to add something here was, we were talking of in the earlier discussion was that, how do you respond to some of the crises which happen? So one of the things is that in our category, for example, one of the things is that it's a new category. There are a lot of queries, questions which come in, and one of the crises which the industry faced some time back was the question of battery fires, coming in. So now what happens is that whether a consumer or a news report comes in, even if your product is not involved, it is an industry issue. It impacts you as well because, then the perception becomes, should I go for an EV because there is an issue in here. Now, how do you respond to that? So the reason I brought this up was because, there, even if your brand is not involved, the entire industry gets impacted because people feel the perception is, EV is not safe, the battery bursts, and there are incidents like these. So, to add to it, sometimes what we've also done is that in these kind of cases where we are not involved, there is some other brand which is where the issue is. What we've tried to assuage is to actually have people who are actually using our product and to give out testimonials, So they could not be, professional influencer. They're actual consumer who've used it for over a period of time. So what we do is that, we have bank of these, testimonials with us. And these are genuine customers. They are not forced to, send these. And we keep them as, you might say as backups for these kind of issues. And they have worked fairly well for us because, especially in when there's a product or category is new, people would actually like to see, person who have used the vehicle, or saying that, I have not faced that kind. So I think that has helped. And we as a organization, we always, make sure that we try and keep these kind of testimonials handy, especially for the comms crisis.
Can I just add one point?
Yeah, sorry, okay.
Yeah. So one more thing here is our strategy is similar to what they do, and while completely different categories. In our case, it also extends to subject matter experts and frontline workers. Now, what happens is continuously, if there are people who are championing your brand and are supporting it with evidence, and they have dedicated communities, it doesn't have to be a large community, they might have very small communities, but if they can help sort of demystify some myths that come in during a humanitarian situation, which in our line of work is the crisis communication aspect, this part really helps. So subject matter experts not activated just during a crisis, but maybe bringing back something that they have supported with earlier. Academicians who might have worked with us, doctors who might have worked with us, that had helped us a lot during COVID. It helps during multiple situations for multiple audiences, whether it's children, government, young people, teachers. So everybody becomes an influencer in that scenario.
One last subject. Have any of you used traditional media to handle crisis that is happening on social media?
Yes, absolutely. And I could share a real example from not very long ago, when we had the last wave of COVID, where there was shortage of oxygen everywhere. We had to bring in lots of oxygen concentrators into the country. The government was helping, Air India was helping.
Traditional mediums and what we do on digital, it is really because your employees are a part of the organization and nobody understands your brand and the product, your services more than they do. So when they advocate for your brand, it just comes out very organically and the customers really connect with them at large. Because it doesn't come out like an advertisement, right? It is your, with the details that your employees would talk about your organization, it just comes out very organically. And to them, I think it's number one, the kind of pride that they take for the organization. Also, I would just want to bring this closer to home by sharing an example that there's a campaign implementation that we've done recently. So we have our phlebotomists who are the sample collectors. They go to home and they spend good 10 to 15 minutes on an average with each customer. So, and they are of course, the face of the brand, right? They are representing the brand. So we ask them to, of course, they analyze the overall sentiments of the customers, and if they feel that they have something positive, the customers have something positive to say about the brand, they video record them. And eventually that is being shared on our official WhatsApp groups, on our group email IDs. We've even taken them, put together as a campaign and promoted it, cross-promoted it on traditional mediums, right? And it just comes out very beautifully. And when it is shared on the social media platforms by these employees, the brand ambassadors, it just gets a lot of organic traction and just builds trust. The kind of industry that we come in from, which is healthcare, trust and credibility is really, really important. And that's where it comes from.
Absolutely. I think we'll end it on that great note. At the end of the day, all of us here are trying to just build trust, credibility, reputation of our brands. Fact of the matter is that handling a crisis was always tough. It's become even more complex now, but then anything complex gets the best out of all of us. So I guess exciting times ahead. Let's make the most of it. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us.
Thank you.